Hey everyone, so I'm going to make a video on my phone today, mostly because I think the quality of the video and sound is probably better on here, but yeah, so let's get started. I made a reel today on my Instagram, and a lot of the things I share about are things that are like my own experiences and learning and discoveries, etc. And I think it's important to have these discussions and share it so that we become aware of what's going on with us. And in particular, this thing that I brought up was about misinterpreted connections that we have with others. I had started off my reel with bringing up a quite famous scene in The Office. If you watch The Office, you'll know which one I'm talking about. It is the casino episode. And it's when, at the end of the night, Jim Halpert decides to confess his feelings to Pam Beesly, in which she responds, "I'm sorry that you misinterpreted our connection." And, it's a real gut punch. Like, when you hear or feel that words or that somebody that perceived like feeling isn't reciprocated by someone, even though you felt that feeling or connection really strongly with another person, that not being reciprocated can feel super, super, super like gut-wrenching, especially if you're someone who's an avoidant. The reason for that is that avoidants do not connect with other people. So if you watch the reel I'm talking about and you have seen other videos talked about avoidance. Avoidants don't actually connect with other people. In fact, we are unable to, someone who hasn't done the healing and is very avoidant, especially like dismissive avoidant and even fearful avoidant, they have the inability to connect with others. They can only connect with people at a surface level, and that includes their friendships. It's really hard for them to connect with. It's not to say that it's not possible. It is absolutely possible, but it's hard for them to do it. So they can connect with people on a surface level, and they might be someone who is the life of the party, or someone who's really funny, and someone who gets along well with multiple types of people, like personalities and things like that. And they seem to be really easygoing and just like in general, like are chill and vibe with everyone. But really at the root of that, they're not letting anyone actually see their inner world. In fact, that inner world is barricaded like Fort Knox, and ain't nobody getting through that. So at the root, people who are very avoidant have, like I said, barricaded and blocked off of that part of themselves and have really thickened the walls around that part of themselves. They have really raised up the barriers and the guards in respect to like guarding that part of themselves and keeping people away from that. And the reason for that is that people who are avoidant aren't being avoidant because they don't like people. It's because they are afraid to get hurt. At the root of it, they're very afraid to get hurt, and there's in the core there's a core wounding there about not being good enough and feeling unworthy, and that someone that you care about deeply has the ability to hurt you deeply, and that's very terrifying. And so we don't allow ourselves to be that vulnerable with other people because it puts us in a place of re-experiencing that wound that we probably received during childhood, or even something like really huge that happened to us that created that wound and that started us, that made us start barricading ourselves. And this is all happening at a subconscious level. So we're not even aware that this is happening when it happens. And so let's go back to that thing about the misinterpreted connections. So what's happening in these situations is that when someone who is like avoidant, especially, or people just in general who have experienced trauma and tend to keep that, part of themselves, that feel very vulnerable in that part of themselves. What happens is when they do connect with someone and they find a connection. They sense a connection with someone, or they feel like they're on the same wavelength or on the same frequency of that person. What tends to happen is they tend to maybe lower their guard with that person, and they have maybe more probability to be a little bit more vulnerable with that person. And also they have this desire or longing to connect with that person and to create some type of connection with that person. And so when there is an awareness or recognition or knowing that the other person doesn't actually feel the same way back to them, or does something that shows that they totally don't feel the same way back, or doesn't return the same reciprocal energy in terms of their actions towards the relationship, friendship, connection, or whatever, then what happens is that the person who's avoidant or in that type of like sitting in that emotion will be hit with like a wave of shame. A wave of shame that is really touching, I'll immediately now touching that core wound of feeling unworthy. And as I said, this is happening at a subconscious level without any awareness of the like to the person of what is actually happening below the surface. And so the feelings that will erupt will be various feelings depending on what occurred in the situation to trigger the person, the avoidant person. Feelings that might arise depending on the situation and the event that triggered those emotions can be anywhere from like feelings of anger or rage, feelings of jealousy, feelings of like immediately wanting to close off, feelings of thinking that people are unsafe and everyone's shit and that no one is ever going to be a good person to you. And just like this projection of like all these negative things towards everyone else. But below the surface, there's a lot of wounding and hurt and pain that is occurring. And so how do we get past this? It's easy for people like that, like me and even my own awareness of that in the past, like to misinterpret connections. And I wouldn't say misinterpreting is necessarily even the right word, because if you watch The Office, you will obviously find out that he absolutely did not misinterpret a connection. But not everyone's going to be ready to meet you where you are at, and not at the speed that you want to, or not ready to face it, or maybe they just aren't going to be there, or whatever the reason, whatever the situation. So here's the thing, is that we're going to encounter these things always. People are always going to feel differently from two sides of the story, whether it's your colleagues, your friendships, relationships. People are always going to view things from a completely different lens and have a different perception of what is occurring between your connection. So yes, we absolutely want reciprocal energy. You absolutely want that, but what can we do to not feel so wounded in those situations? Well, what we can do is begin to do the healing work, find those wounds inside of us that feel unworthy, and start to peel back the layers and address those. And then the second thing we need to do is to give ourselves that love and attention and all that stuff, meeting our own needs and meeting our own I guess our requirements and things like that. Things like having boundaries, things like not leaning in towards people, but allowing them to lean in to you. So also making sure that you work on your own self-worth and reparenting yourself and pouring into yourself. Like, these are all the things we have to do. And in order to kind of get over this, essentially we have to get to a place where we feel worthy already on our own, so that even if somebody does pass us over, yeah, we might feel bummed out by the situation and feel like, man, that sucks. But it won't trigger a core wound within you and make you feel so completely devastated and like your world's just been torn upside down. So anytime we have that kind of emotional reactivity to something, then it's always pointing towards something that's happening below the surface. And it's a good idea to explore that and sit with it and see what's happening. So yes, to recap, misinterpreted connections. Yes, absolutely can happen. Everyone's going to have things from a different lens. Avoidant people tend to experience this more because of their inability to connect with others. And when they find someone that they do feel like they connect with, they, you know, you got to remember, avoidant people are freaking closed off to like the nth degree, whatever. And so when they meet someone who they feel like they connect to, they kind of like drop their barriers a little bit, which is a big thing for them because they never drop their barriers. And so once they feel like it's not reciprocated, that shame that they feel is quite intense and quite high. And so it's a very big wound that they feel during that moment. And they spiral into this, like, you know, this downward spiral of like unworthiness and stuff. And so learning how to meet our own needs and to feel unworthy on our own is the only way to surpass that and to address the core wound there and to give ourselves the love. And so that we no longer misinterpret connections. And like I said, in the event that we do, we can bounce back from it very easily, differently, and also being able to communicate things and to figure out what is actually happening and to not kind of go off of like what we're thinking or feeling, but we can actually just communicate our needs and our boundaries or whatever it is that we need to do. So this is why doing the healing work is important. And healing work is primarily about focusing on our own wounding, our own patterns, our own inner world, in order that we can create a better relationship with ourselves. And in turn, that creates a better relationships with other people. And then what we can do if you're someone who's avoidant is to focus on creating these connections with your friends. And slowly, and creating friendships that you can actually bond with, because most avoidant people don't actually have friends that they bond with and that they feel close and vulnerable with. And so being able to get to a place where you can begin to be yourself and vulnerable with people is really, really important. And so that's it. That's all my video is about misinterpreted connections, who that usually happens to, why that's happening, what's going on, and how can we change that like big reaction that we employ like during those moments in our lives. So I hope this was helpful. If you find this video helpful, you can like and subscribe and share. And yeah, I'll be sharing more content about that. Most of my content is geared towards healing and you know, avoidant behaviors and narcissistic abuse recovery and things like that. But you know, I talk about lots of other healing aspects as well. So anyways, I hope you have a beautiful day. I hope you found this helpful, and take care of yourself. Bye.